and state government, I have been tremendously blessed to see some of New Mexico's most incredibly profound thinkers, visionaries, and policymakers responding to the complex challenges that New Mexico has faced and continues to face. And I have been honored to work with many of them over the 20 years, and I have been just tremendously blessed to witness the profound impact of our guest today. Her rise to prominence is a uniquely beautiful and powerful New Mexican story, and an American story at that. Her journey epitomizes the struggles, the persistence, and the perseverance of many New Mexicans. It is a story that should inspire all of us. She is a single mom, struggled through high school and undergraduate school, but her persistence and determination to fulfill her childhood dream of becoming a lawyer, to be in the service of others, guided and gave her strength to fulfill her dream and become a very successful attorney. A few days ago, many of us heard her 86-year-old grandfather tell a beautiful story of her dream as a child. We heard her grandpa tell that story of that dream growing up on the Acoma Pueblo Reservation. When she won a seat to represent the west side of Albuquerque, she became the first Pueblo woman to become a member of the New Mexico legislature, just a generation after Native Americans won the right to vote. What is equally remarkable is she won a seat where there was no Native American base in her legislative district. She represents a very diverse district on the west side, and her victory reflects the broad appeal she has. Her constituents have returned her for 5 terms, reflecting the confidence and the trust in her abilities and effectiveness. She is a former vice chair of the Judiciary Committee and currently chairs the State Government, Elections, and Indian Affairs Committee. She has been an advocate of education, environmental justice, a champion for working families, healthcare expansion, and affordability. She has been a champion for minority and women-owned businesses, balanced economic development, civil rights and human rights, equity, and justice issues. She has been recognized by advocacy groups locally, statewide, and nationally for her exemplary work as a policymaker. We will hear her passionate vision and her experience and the wisdom that she has gained through all of her life experiences that really enriches and gives great value for the kind of representative we all desire to represent us in our nation's capital. And with that, I am honored to present to all of you a New Mexico treasure, as I defined it, because she is that for all that she represents, the Honorable Representative Georgine Lewis.
Guatsi, everyone. Thank you for joining us, especially to our panelists today. They are mentors, they are friends, and I just want to thank you all for coming together to talk about issues that are important to New Mexico. So thank you, Tawa'a. And to the audience out there, thank you so much for joining us in our Breaking Bread series to talk about policy. This conversation means a lot to me because I truly believe, and with no disrespect to anyone, but that I am the most effective legislator in this race, and that I can hit the ground running if you trust me with your vote and send me to Congress to represent our families and our communities and really work hard to ensure that New Mexico is front and center when it comes to taking care of one another. For those of you that I haven't met yet, that I hope are joining us as new friends, I'm Georgine Lewis. I grew up here in New Mexico on the Acoma Reservation. And I'm glad that we showed the video because that kind of sums my story. and how I came to the point of where I am, really focusing on the core values that I was raised with, culture, clan, and community. And that really means a lot to me. And we see this in the leaders that we have here today. This is community that I've been so blessed and fortunate to work with in the state legislature and in state government agencies and partnering up with friends. And I think that's really important, especially when we're talking about going to Congress and sending someone to Congress, to be able to maintain open communication and have dialogues about important issues, especially when it comes to policy matters in New Mexico. So I'm so grateful to have our panelists here that are crazy intelligent and just rock stars in their own means. So in their own roles as Chairwoman Chasey, Chairman Maestas, Mr. Warren, Mr. Pecos, and our City Councilor as well. So thank you guys all. And without further ado, I think we can start the discussion and really share what we've done already and what we plan to do in the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Georgine. We will go ahead and kick it off with Chairwoman Chasey.
Thank you all for inviting me to be part of this today. I only have 2 minutes, and it's hard to give adequate credit to my former vice chair and now my chairwoman, because I'm a member of the State Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee. I wanted to talk about my experience with Representative Lewis as an advocate for consumer protection. She has been really a champion in the battle against predatory lending. And I think the discussion we had in the recent session kind of overshadowed what she accomplished in 2019. She had a very complex piece of legislation that was the the House Bill 150, the Installment and Small Loan Changes Act. And she had to battle the predatory lenders and their we call it the Full Employment Act for lobbyists when there's a bill like this, because every one of our favorite lobbyists ends up with a client representing the other side. But what that bill did was that it instituted some very important license reporting requirements, 20 in all, and those have to be reported by the industry by April 15th annually. And so I think the first comprehensive report is due this next month. And I'll tell you, there was quite a bit of wrangling over that bill, but we got it over to the Senate 53-15, and then the lobbyists started the work on the other side, and leadership actually had to intervene to get that bill advanced, but then it passed the Senate floor unanimously. So I want to say that I think our chairwoman, Georgine Lewis, has been exemplary in this area, and thank you for that, Georgine.
Thank you, Chairwoman Chasey, and thank you for your great mentorship, especially as a freshman and being, trusted with the responsibility of being vice chairman for you. So I really appreciate all that learning experience, and really I want to provide my sincere appreciation for your statements, because I think there's a lot of misinformation about what happened during the last session when it comes to predatory lending. And I just want people to know that, I won't put out information that's misleading. I will always be very straightforward about my positions, especially because I was a young single mom, and I knew, and I know what it's like to survive paycheck to paycheck. And we really need to ensure that we have a system that is set up for people when they're looking for financial resources in times of emergencies. And I don't think that system is there yet. And, that's something that I promise to continue working on. But I just wanted to thank you for your statements.
Thank you both. Now we're going to pass it over to Mr. Warren.
Thank you very much for inviting me to join you all this afternoon. What's taken place recently in Georgia is another clear reason why we need Representative Georgine Lewis in Congress. First, we witnessed the historic election of 2 Democrats to the US Senate with crucial support from Georgia's African-American, Latinx, Native, API, and other communities of color. In response, the Republican-controlled legislature and Republican governor have rushed to overhaul the state's election laws in ways that we know are going to discourage and disenfranchise voters of color. President Biden just called this Jim Crow in the 21st century, and we know civil rights groups are advocating to strengthen federal election laws. And we know this is just the beginning. Republicans in other states are going to be moving to restrict voting rights in their states, hoping to take control of Congress in 2022 and the White House in 2024. We can't allow this to happen. We need Congress to act now. Georgine Lewis is absolutely the right person to help lead this fight on behalf of CD1. She's been reelected to serve 5 terms in our legislature by the people of her district. As has been said, she's served as the chair of the House State Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee, co-chair of the Interim Indian Affairs Committee, and past vice chair of the House Judiciary Committee. She's proven that she can successfully advocate on behalf of her constituents and enact laws that'll create jobs, protect our environment, support a women's right to choose, and promote education. During just this session, she sponsored HB 231, the Native American Polling Place Protection Act, whose purpose was to ensure Native American voters are guaranteed access to polling places near our communities. She also sponsored HB 4, the New Mexico Civil Rights Act this year, which ensures that every New Mexican receives fair and equal treatment regardless of their race or background. So based on this and much more, I hope you'll agree with me that Georgine is the right woman at the right time to represent the people of CD1. As a single mother who raised her daughter while working hard to earn her college and law degrees, she shares the experience and determination of many New Mexicans who are facing and overcoming life's challenges. And as a fierce Acoma Pueblo tribal member, I know that Georgine is the best person to continue the proud legacy of former Representative Deb Haaland to ensure that the voices of all New Mexicans continue to be heard in the halls of Congress. So thank you.
Thank you, Alvin. We actually talked about voting issues this morning, and just reminding people that Native Americans have just recently had the right to vote is extremely important. Our own Cindy Nava just became a US citizen and finally is going to be able to cast her vote on June 1st. And really, unless you don't have these challenges, and I think that's what we're seeing now in Georgia, we really need to ensure that people have access, that people are able to cast their ballots for those folks that are going to fight for them. And so, just reminding everyone that I will be a supporter and advocate in passing the John Lewis voting rights. So, just reminding everyone that voting is a privilege and sometimes barriers are put in front of us because they don't want us to have that right to vote. So thank you for bringing up those issues.
Thank you. We'll now go to Representative and Chairman Maestas.
Thank you, Ms. Nava. Thank you very much for having me. Georgine, great to see you. Congratulations on a successful session and a great campaign ahead of us in June and next June and next November. So I just want to take a couple minutes to talk about Representative Lewis and some of the accomplishments she's been able to do recently. But it was poetic justice when the West Side redistricted in 2011 and Representative Lewis was chosen by the West Side voters to represent that new district. As Regis Pecos said, I believe she's one of maybe only one or two urban native representatives in the entire country, representing urban districts as a native representative. It's just fantastic and indicative of her leadership and her story. So my district and Georgine's kind of intertwine each other on the west side. So we come from the same community, the same supporters, the same advocates, the same maybe disgruntled neighbors. And she's just a tremendous partner here on the west side as we build our economy, build our schools, and do everything we can to improve the lives of young people. A couple bills in general are House Bill 4. Let me just talk about House Bill 4 for a second. House Bill 4 was referred to as the Civil Rights Act. We essentially in 60 days undid, let me count, 54 years of federal legal jurisprudence. And let me just explain. In 1967, the Supreme Court ruled that officers involved in alleged civil rights allegations have a qualified immunity, are immune from suit if in fact they weren't put on proper notice. Over the years, that notice has been shrunk. And so you have to find an exact fact pattern to hold officers accountable in misconduct cases and civil rights violations. It's gone into an absurd result. So what we had to do was create a state law to allow plaintiffs opportunities in state court to supersede the federal court proceedings. It was an almost insurmountable legal issue just to even draft the bill, just to have it consistent with our laws, to have it consistent with overturning federal laws. And we got it through, and Representative Georgine Lewis took on that fight. She went through multiple committees and multiple interest groups and still maintaining public safety interests for the state of New Mexico. And now it will reshape policing in the state. It will encourage more young people to become officers and reshape our relationship with officers for decades to come. So congratulations, Representative Lewis, for doing that gigantic bill, House Bill 4. And also HGR 1, the 1% for early childhood. People talk about it being a 5-year struggle, a 10-year struggle. This is the first time in our 109-year history as a state that we have taken control of our state lands, the money that is derived from our state lands, and spent it the way we want to spend it, not the way the federal government has imposed its restrictions on our ability to spend our own money. And so Georgine, by becoming a co-sponsor on that bill, reaching out to tribal communities, rural communities who were very leery of whether resources and monies are going to go to those small towns, villages, and pueblos and reservations, convince them that no, we will do it right. We will spend the money in rural communities. We will reach out to at-risk youth, Native youth, limited English-speaking youth throughout the state and build out this wonderful system where we're going to be the envy of the country. So we need a strong candidate on the ballot. It's going to go to the ballot in November. Representative Georgine Lewis will be the incumbent on that ballot, and we need a strong voice to convince people to get it across the finish line. In addition, we need a strong voice in Congress because we have to, once again, get congressional consent to spend our own money. There's no greater voice of the candidates to push that fight in DC and make sure that that final piece of the puzzle is accomplished. And we can spend over $200 million annually, which will grow beyond inflation forever for young people in the state of New Mexico without spending a dime of taxpayer money from their pockets. It's their money derived from state land. So it's just tremendous. Representative Lewis, what you've done this session, it's indicative of what you've done the last 10 years and frankly, the whole history of your life. So I'd ask all state central committee members to do a deep dive into Representative Lewis's history of accomplishment. There is no more accomplished candidate to send to DC on this slate of candidates than Representative Lewis. And I urge everyone to support her, get to know her. And thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, Chairman Maestas. I appreciate the work that you've done, especially with HDR 1. All your work with criminal justice reform is also very huge. And yeah, thanks to everyone that's going to go out and vote for that measure and really recognize that it's such an investment that's going to pay back just so much better in the future. And so I thank you and all of the many advocates for the work on that bill, and really looking to see how we can move forward with the criminal justice reforms. I know you and Chairwoman Chasey have put a lot of work into that too. And I think we got it funded this year. You guys all got it funded with your junior money. So that's fantastic. And I think that's gonna prove just so much improvement for our communities, investment in our communities and our families. So thank you for that, and vote for that. Yeah, that's the next thing. We just need to get voters to get that out there, and I promise I'll be promoting that as well too.
We will now go with City Councilor Gabe Vasquez.
Thank you so much, Cindy, and it's a pleasure to be here with you, here with you all. My name is Gabe Vasquez, and I'm a Las Cruces City Councilor. So you might be wondering perhaps what I'm doing here for this CD1 race, but the truth is Georgine is not just only a good friend, but I have seen Georgine in action, and representation matters. We have 3 federal representatives in the US House in New Mexico, and so every seat counts, because we really need people to fight for every corner of the state to bring home the type of support, the type of investment, and the type of policies that are going to improve our state, from Las Cruces to Albuquerque to Farmington, Santa Fe, and Taos. Every corner of the state is going to really have to count on every representative that we have to make the changes that we really need to continue moving forward. And so representation matters for me. I was lucky to be the first to be born in the United States in my family, a privilege that I take very seriously. There's a heavy weight that I feel on my shoulders representing my community in Las Cruces that really embodies the spirit and the values that my family taught me. And I see so many of those same values and that spirit in Representative Lewis. And representation does matter, especially in the halls of Congress. We have seen how community organizers and people of color have really mobilized in the last several years around candidates who really represent that grassroots movement of folks who are really wanting to see substantive change. And that change can only come through effective legislation, right? You have to be able to work oftentimes across the aisle, or even with colleagues in your same party that have different opinions or that have different styles of governing, or to get things done, because ultimately we have seen that gridlock in Congress slow important progress down. And I think Secretary Haaland was one of the most effective members of the House before taking the position of our new Secretary of Interior, of which I am incredibly proud. But I see that same spirit of bipartisanship, of being able to bring people together and getting things done in Congress that Secretary Haaland has in Representative Lewis. And that's really, really important and really key to bring those benefits to New Mexico. Part of my career outside of the City Council and in the City Council has been working on conservation and environmental issues. And so I like to say that even though in New Mexico, we talk often in a manner of deficit of how poor of a state we are, unfortunately, of some of the educational outcomes that our youth have, that are not the greatest in the country, and our per capita income not the greatest in the country. But one thing that I pride myself in is that we are very rich in culture, we are very rich in history, and everybody knows that as New Mexicans, from every corner of the state, we are proud to be from New Mexico. And part of that is our traditions and our ties to the land, to the environment, to wildlife, to the mountains, the deserts, and the rivers that really make up our whole state. And so I've been lucky to work with Representative Lewis on several pieces of state legislation that have been really important to me. In fact, Representative Lewis was key in getting our Wildlife Corridors Act passed 2 years ago. And what that allowed essentially was to create a fund for the Department of Game and Fish to prioritize areas in which wildlife could safely cross across different state and federal highways, but also to be able to create that connectivity so that wildlife can continue to thrive in the state as one of our greatest resources. This year, Representative Lewis was one of the original sponsors for House Bill 51, the Environmental Database Act. And the Environmental Database Act transformational, because it's really the ground layer, it's the foundation for how we begin to look at environmental justice issues in New Mexico. This will be a public database because this bill passed. This will be a public database that will bring together all of the different agencies, all the data from the different agencies in New Mexico, from wildlife data to methane emissions data, to public land and state land use data, even on private lands, to begin to finally understand, right, that all that we do to the land is interconnected, from oil and gas drilling, fossil fuel development, to big, conservation and habitat stamp projects, to just how much water is flowing in our rivers. And so this will be a key tool that will help us understand how to prioritize and where to prioritize conservation projects in New Mexico, so that we can continue to have those rich ties to the land for Hispano communities in the north that have these rich traditions of grazing, to Native American communities who have lived on this land and taken care of this land since time immemorial, and continue to manage their natural resources for our benefit. This is just a groundbreaking bill that I am so happy that Representative Lewis was able to sponsor. And it takes that kind of smart approach to getting incremental steps to helping to fight climate change and helping to alleviate all of those symptoms that we have suffered as a result of some of the adverse effects that we have faced as a state from the impacts of fossil fuel extraction and from the pollution that it brings. And I'm confident that Representative Lewis will be a strong champion for us in Congress, following in the steps of Secretary Haaland and carving her own path to protect our clean air, our clean water, our public lands, and doing so from a place as a person of color, as a Native American person who has the history of taking care of this land for many years. And I don't think you can replace that. And so I also urge the South Central committee members to wholeheartedly support Representative Georgine Lewis in this effort. And we need another person to represent this state that represents the values that Ms. Representative Lewis represents. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabe. And also thanks to our House co-sponsor, Chairwoman Chasey, on House Bill 51. That's really just great that we got it to the finish line. And I'm really happy because it's going to provide so much information that is available to the public, but really inaccessible. So now we're going to be able to have that transparency where people can look up all kinds of information. And thanks, Gabe. I think, you're correct. You're not in CD1, but having those communications with our communities, I'm never going to guess, what's important for your district, what's important for your constituents, but opening those lines of communication so that you tell me, and this is going to be throughout CD1 and throughout our partnership, so that we can pass significant legislation and keep doing well for our communities, but really having those conversations instead of guessing that I know everything, because I don't. And working in partnerships and collaborations so that we find out what are the interests of our communities, because they're not always going to match up. So hearing from folks telling us that is really important, and I'm even more so motivated to work with each other in partnership to best serve New Mexico. So I do appreciate that you took time to be out here, especially with your passion for environmental issues. And I'll also keep working on those, because that's what I was taught. I didn't learn it in school. I learned it growing up on the reservation and through my culture and our traditions. So that's really important that I'll keep with me always and fight to protect our earth and our environment. So thank you.
Thank you both for that. At this moment, we will now go to Mr. Regis Pecos. I think you're muted, Regis.
Thank you, Cindy. I really love the conversation because it really reflects the kind of testimony to the versatility that you have, Representative. And it's the kind of versatility that makes for an effective policymaker. You know, we've heard from Representative Maestas in your co-sponsorship of a historic moment to pass House Joint Resolution 1 that begins to address the investment in early childhood education and care for the youngest of our children. But I've heard you articulate the importance with regard to you being raised with your family in Acoma, and the importance of the value, as your grandpa talked about, giving equal value to the things that define us as Indigenous people, language and culture and our history. But it also speaks to the necessity that you epitomize, that the Western education is also equally valuable. And as your grandpa, I can see him vividly talk about the balance that is necessary. And you epitomize that. And I think the kind of reflections of your work over the years is a testament to the richness that comes with these lived experiences that really define your core values. And my area of focus has been, of course, another historic moment recently with regard to the Martinez-Yazzie decision that really many have referred to as a landmark decision and defined this time as a watershed moment. But I want to focus, without being so parochial, but it speaks to the issue with regard to why a person like you and your background is such an important voice in the state legislature and an important voice in Congress. You know, the first education policy was unveiled in 1890, defining Indian education, but it was defined within the framework of colonialism and manifest destiny, that really education was really a process to assimilate us and eventually make us invisible. And as we reflect upon this watershed moment today, with regard to the opportunity, you really epitomize becoming the author of new strategies that addresses what very few people know, and that is the uniqueness of Indigenous citizens that have a dual citizenship, which bears tremendous responsibility that we have to contribute to the civic readiness so that the oldest governance systems in the world can continue to be vibrant and survive. But we also have an equally awesome responsibility to be civic ready, and that is within the public school framework that you're a product of. And so in this watershed moment, people like yourself with a lived experience become teachers to your fellow colleagues, your policymakers, who really are the products of what are the fundamental failures of our education system and the way in which our histories, not Indian history or Hispanic history or Black history, is unique, but it's defining our collective history and experiences. And I think the work that you have done, along with your colleagues, Representative Lente, Representative Johnson, and Representative Allison, to really help guide in this incredible time of opportunity, the necessary changes that are so fundamental to create the kind of balance to address the ways in which children of color are still marginalized by the kind of imposed Western framework without giving value to language of Indigenous peoples or our Hispanic brothers and sisters. The richness that they bring linguistically and culturally have often and unfortunately been defined to be liabilities in this Western construct of education. But I think your lived experiences, that is a very rare one as a member of the legislature, along with people like Representative Mo Maestas and Javier Martinez and others that you work with on such a monumental piece of legislation, making a final breakthrough in early childhood education. The focus of Yazi Martinez now is one where we have to invest in building capacity at the tribal level, invest in changing strategies to create the relevance in education, and invest in higher education to produce the capacity that is lacking at the primary and secondary levels. And so your vision and the work that you have contributed towards the development of what is known as the Tribal Remedy Framework that has become the model for others with regard to the need for fundamental changes in how we redefine education for the first time for our purposes. And in a majority state, these are very fundamental changes that are necessary that can provide for the opportunity that, as we see on camera, Gabe, we see Representative Maestas, we see the former Lieutenant Governor, and yourself are all examples of what's possible if education is developed and provided in a way that creates relevance, that produces individuals like all of you that can provide for some profound contributions to the vitality of what we all call home in New Mexico. And education is at the heart. And for all who are listening, Representative Lewis has been a champion from early childhood to the responses in moving legislation along with her colleagues to provide for the kind of fundamental changes to move away from the fragmentation that has been our history and to really change the course of education. And so Representative Lewis, it is just heartening that we can recognize the way in which individuals like yourself can become a teacher among your colleagues that can help to influence and guide policymaking, and in the case of education, to really define a new era where we fundamentally change what we provide for especially children of color, as in the landmark decision to address the needs of at-risk children, to address the needs of those bilingual, English as a second language, ELL and TESOL, and Native children and children with special needs. And your work over the years stands out along with the likes of your colleague, Representative Maestas, to be addressing all of the overlapping issues that stem from what has been acknowledged is the long history of systemic racism and institutional discrimination. And I just want to say thank you for being such a great champion for all of our children in the time that you have been part of the legislature. So to all who are listening, there's no greater champion than who we have as a candidate for Congress, that the advocacy she has demonstrated can be elevated to the national level for the kind of changes and support necessary to make New Mexico continue to be a vibrant place where we don't sacrifice language and culture, but we create for the kind of balance that results in the kind of individuals that we see on your panel here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for bringing up Yazi Martinez, because it really is a landmark decision that's going to help education in our communities, and it really reflects what we need to do differently to provide every child an opportunity to fulfill their potential and find their passion and contribute back to our respective communities. So I know that we're going to see a lot of changes in New Mexico that are all going to be positive and drive our children to succeed. So that's, you know, the framework that's put in place and what occurred during this past legislative session, what's occurring with House Joint Resolution 1 and getting that to the voters, and then being able to have that congressional authorization as well to spend that money. All of these are just parts of the investment that we're putting back into our communities with our children. And so I'm really excited that I've been able to play a role in that. And I look forward to the future, because education really does save lives, and really excited to see that we're moving in the right direction. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. At this time, we're going to essentially kick it off to a few questions, as many as we can get through. Regis, I believe you had a question. We can probably kick it off with that, if you're okay with that, for Georgine.
Yes, and I think she partially answered that question, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is, what is the most significant first step that the state needs to make in the way of a commitment to respond to the findings in Yazzie Martinez?
Great. So I think, that includes developing strategies to make education relevant. That's extremely fundamental at that base level. Addressing the linguistic and cultural needs of our children is critical. I know you referenced that as well. So we're a state that is a minority majority, and these are so fundamentally important to nearly 70% of children that bring richness from the communities that they represent. Little kids growing up on our reservations in the rural areas, but even on our West Side communities, like Representative Maestas, we all have just so much strength to bring to our communities, especially as children growing up. So we need to ensure that assets that have been treated as liabilities is something that we need to move away from. We should be celebrating children and what they bring to our state. So I'm really, again, just excited about everything that's going on to recognize that our culture and our backgrounds and everything that makes us New Mexico, again, are just assets. And if that means we're learning in different ways, then we have to ensure that our children are respected and that we work to their learning advantages to ensure that they're successful. And again, all of this is just going to lead to them being successful for their families and for their communities and for our great state of New Mexico.
Thank you. We do have a few questions submitted by some of the attendees. We have a question from Fernando Ramos, and he says, you have sponsored a lot of legislation here in New Mexico. What legislation are you most looking forward to carrying in Congress?
Oh, thank you. I don't know how to answer that in just one issue. Definitely we need to have a continued recovery after the pandemic to ensure that we build back better. We knew that we had a lot of challenges even before the pandemic in dealing with health and dealing with job opportunities. So I'd really like to have that focus there. But even at that, I know we have to deal with the climate crisis and protecting our Mother Earth. I know voting rights is extremely important to ensure that people have a voice at the polls. Voting is just such a fundamental right that we need to ensure that we protect and we ensure that there are opportunities out there. Really, again, I hate being so broad, but working off the work that Deb Holland started, I think is extremely crucial. She was just great at introducing bipartisan legislation, at really looking at issues that might have gone unnoticed. So really like to continue her work with missing and murdered Indigenous women, and working with our tribal nations, but also reaching out to underrepresented communities of color, minority communities, to ensure that they have a strong voice. And really, I look forward to listening to them. so that I understand these issues and I can work to best serve them.
Thank you for that. Our other question comes from Michelle Lewis, and it says, what do you believe is your greatest attribute to service people?
Oh, I think I really think it's communication. Again, listening to people, understanding their issues, learning how they see things from their own lens instead of assuming that I know what's best for them or that my lens is the same as their lens. Really understanding their struggles, their challenges, and also like their goals and their successes, and really coming to the table to have conversations about how we can work together and lift one another up and ensure that our communities are strong. So I love talking to people and learning, even my colleagues on the other side. I appreciate that we're able to have important dialogues of different issues. And so I think that's really one of the things that I feel that I've done well at. And I think that shows in the legislation that we passed, even if we don't always agree, that we're having these discussions that are important so that we can move forward together.
Thank you. We do have another question from Dr. Gomez Chavez. Hello, doctora. We have a lot of friends here watching, and she asks, regarding the COVID-19 vaccine, we are witnessing that communities from underrepresented backgrounds being hesitant to receive the vaccine. What will you do to try to address this issue?
Hi, Dr. Gomez Chavez. I'm so glad you joined us. And yeah, that's a great question. I was able to get the vaccine early because my employer classified me as an essential worker. And I was really hesitant to get it because I knew we had a lot of people that had underlying health conditions, our elders that weren't provided that same opportunity. But in talking to members in the community, people were saying that they weren't going to get it because they were unsure of the effectiveness or they were unsure of the science. So really what I did is I it's a bittersweet to get it, but put it out there to people that I believe in the science, I believe in everything that we did to ensure that these vaccines were safe. And I think, again, it's all about communicating with people and informing them because not everyone has the same information. But coming from a position where I know people trust me. And so I think putting it out there to provide them with the information that it's safe and that this is something that we need to do to ensure that people are safe and hopefully find our way back to our new normal. But great question. And so if you're out there and you haven't received the vaccine already, please sign up and please get it and stay safe.
Thank you very much. I think this is going to be our last question before I hand it off to the panel to give some closing remarks. But this comes from Aletta Suazo. And she says, why is Native American representation important to CD1? I understand there's an estimated 50,000 Natives in the Albuquerque area.
Yeah, so I think representation is important. I've always been a firm believer in that, to come from a place that we know is different, a place that we know that hasn't really welcomed us. As Native Americans, I think that's probably at all levels of government in various circles, even though we're a state with a broad, diverse group of people. But really understanding the issues that affect Native American tribes as sovereign nations, that affect Native Americans, not as a race or an ethnic group, but as a political classification. So having that, knowing about the land status of tribes is extremely important. And also, I think just having that seat at the table again, where these decisions are being made and being able to have a vote and to really have a vote for the people that are ignored or that are stereotyped or that are not being able to offer their true voice because someone's making an assumption about them. So I think that's extremely important. Having representation matters. I think, you know, we all see it here where we have such fantastic leaders like Governor Pecos and Alvin Warren, who is the Secretary of the Indian Affairs, Maestas, you know, just and Gabe Vasquez, just representation matters. And when we have that seat at the table and bringing those voices, I think we can contribute a lot more to ensure that our families are taken care of, that we have opportunities for our communities and really protections in place for them. So now that CD1 is comprised in Bernalillo County mostly, and having that many number of Native Americans residing here, you know, we can show that we're taking care of them, we're listening to them, and that we're gonna fight for them, but for everyone too. And this is something my grandfather said the other night. He said, Georgine, you have to take care of everyone, you have to listen to everyone, you have to work with everyone. And I think that's just, you know, the advice that I will always look to and know that we can work together, and when we do work together, we can accomplish great things. So I look forward to being the representative that serves all people and really works to be a strong voice and a strong advocate for all of New Mexico.
Thank you, Georgine. Before I send it back over to the panel for some closing remarks, I just want to reiterate, and I want to do a huge shout out and thank you to folks that are watching live, folks that are going to watch the video afterwards, specifically to SEC members. And a special message to you, because we know that you get to have the honor of casting a vote. And it is a very limited group of folks that will get to do that. And from our campaign to you, as an immigrant who has seen Georgine do that work that she has done at the legislature, who knows her values, and as somebody who has learned the privilege of having a vote, because I've never had it, and I've never been able to cast a vote regardless of over 14 years of policy and political involvement. And the fact that I get to cast the first vote of my entire life this year, I want to remind you of how important it is to have that vote, that privilege, and for you to think of the many individuals that you're representing when you go cast that vote, because many of us will not be able to do that, at least not at this stage. And I ask you to look at Georgine. I ask you to look at her experience and the culture that she brings to the table and the strength that she brings through the folks that have stood with her, that are standing with our team, with the campaign, and that have endorsed her from across the country. She will take all of that into the general to ensure that we take that seat and continue that work that our dear Deb Haaland started. With that said, I'm gonna go ahead and pass it off to Mr. Warren.
Well, I just want to once again just say how much I appreciate being part of this conversation. And I will just briefly say again to all of you who chose to join, thank you very much. And especially to those who are on the SEC. When CD1 sent Deb Haaland to Congress, you helped New Mexico make history. This is yet another opportunity to do so. Representation does matter. Qualifications matter. Having a heart for this work and a dedication to serving people matters. And all of those are represented in Georgine Lewis. So I encourage you to really see her for who she is and what she can bring to our state and to our country, and give her the opportunity to serve us all. Thank you.
Gabe, go right ahead.
Thank you so much, Cindy. And I apologize, my camera went out earlier. Broadband problems, which is another important issue we have to solve in New Mexico. But yes, to the SEC members and our guests that are here, Cindy, and certainly for all of our panelists, thank you for having me. I think it's a critical and important choice to make. We are at the crossroads, not just in New Mexico, but in our country, of who we elect to these positions that make decisions for all of us. Not just New Mexico, not just CD1, but our entire country, as we have seen just time and time again, the foundation of our democracy attacked, our communities of color continuously under attack. And there's nobody better to represent New Mexico than a woman of color like Representative Lewis, that has the experience, that has the talent, that has the values and the life that really represents all of our values that we want to see here in New Mexico. I would be absolutely proud and honored to call Representative Lewis my congresswoman in New Mexico. I hope you would be too. And I urge you, for the health of our planet, our wildlife, the future of our water and our air, to please choose Representative Lewis. Not only will she be a great congresswoman, but I think she'd be an amazing partner to Secretary Holland at the Department of Interior. So thank you so much, Cindy, and thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Gabe. We appreciate you.
Thank-
Chairman Maestas.
Thank you. I know that the hour is short. We had CD1 had 3 congresspeople for 30 years. And then we've had 3 congresspeople for 12 years. We need someone who's committed to longevity, and we need someone powerful. New Mexico has so much more to teach Washington, D.C. than Washington, D.C. has to teach us. There is no more perfect candidate than Representative Lewis to represent Albuquerque, CD1, and New Mexico in Washington, D.C. for the next decade. You know, her district is more like CD1, and she has represented it to the fullest and incorporated all members of the community in her representation. She has the strongest track record. You know, we all know what we stand for as Democrats. And so I implore the state central committee members who represent other people to take that into consideration when you vote. Any candidate can rattle off what we stand for as Democrats. But Miss Georgine Lewis has actually done it, has actually forged those coalitions, gone from committee to committee, and made impactful legislation. She can do the same in DC, cognizant of our community, as her family has been entrenched in this community for decades and even centuries. So I implore you to vote Representative Lewis on your first ballot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Pecos.
Yes, thank you to all who joined us this afternoon for this incredibly beautiful dialogue reflecting on the work of our representative. You know, we all say how deeply we love New Mexico because of the uniqueness of the cultural diversity. Representative Lewis clearly represents the versatility that she has demonstrated as a bridge builder across cultures. And I hope that members of the SCC can continue to uphold the kind of diverse representation of our state by supporting Representative Georgine Lewis as the best candidate to represent us. And so want to wish you well, Representative, and I implore all of the members to consider what an extraordinary, profound candidate we have that will make all of us proud to continue to express the love that we have for the culture and the spirit and the beauty that comes. And her going to Congress can continue to epitomize what a special place New Mexico is. So thank you all for the time and opportunity today. And to all of the panelists who I deeply love and admire and respect. Thank you.
Thank you. I won't have to wait for Cindy to come back to me, but first I just want to thank our amazing group of panelists today. They have demonstrated success. They have demonstrated commitment to our communities, and they have really showed us how when we work together in New Mexico, we can accomplish a lot. So I just really want to thank you from, myself, just for all the work that you've done for New Mexico, for all the work that you will continue to do for New Mexico, and really for being there and showing your support, because you guys are amazing in your own right. So tawa for that. And to everyone that tuned in, shout out to the SCC members. Thank you for joining us. Shout out to supporters or people that are interested in learning about how I would love to move forward and bring New Mexico to everything that it can be. And I hope that my work here in the legislature that I've done for the last 9 years, my work as a lawyer in our tribal communities for more than 15 years, really shows that I'm committed to making a difference, and I'm committed to working with folks throughout New Mexico to ensure that we grow. And I think that the work that we've done with education, with civil rights, with our environment, these are some things that I'll be moving forward when I'm in Congress. And I think just the broad reach of support nationally has been just great. And I think that's something I can bring, especially during the June 1st election, when we need to motivate everyone in New Mexico to get out and vote. And thank you to the team, Cindy, Alejandro, and Jason. You guys have been incredible. And I love that you are sharing this journey with me, because you guys are all just fantastic also in your own right. And so I have a lot of love for everyone. and I just thank you again. And I respectfully ask, if you're a SCC member, to please cast your first vote for Georgine Lewis. And I promise that I will continue to work my butt off so that we have a strong voice for all of New Mexico, and that we're there for the long haul doing this work and ensuring that people do look to New Mexico and they respect us and work with us to serve all of New Mexico, to serve all of New Mexicans. So thank you, Tawa.
Thank you so much for joining us.